Morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So this is our first live stream in the morning at 4 a.m. It's actually 4:30 a.m. where I am, which is Central Standard Time. But I wanted to. This week we're going to be doing Bible study at during this time as opposed to the normal 7 p.m. And so I'll wait a few minutes to see if any of you guys join in. So today we're going to be discussing Deuteronomy chapters 4, 5, and 6. Very interesting chapters. And I promise not to keep you too long. Good morning, Rahim. You are up early. Good morning. And since it's so early, Rahim, I promise normally, I always say this not to keep you guys too long, but I'm really going to try and get through this relatively quickly because I know in the morning we have to get ready for work. We have other things going on, and so we won't take too long to go over this. So let's just go ahead and get started. Let's pray really quick. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to study your word with my brothers and sisters in Christ. Father, I pray that you open our eyes, ears, and minds so that we may understand and interpret your word as you have intended for it to be interpreted. I pray that you bless each and every single person that participates in this live, all the spiritual blessings that are necessary for them to accomplish the goals that you have set before them. I pray this in the mighty name of your son Jesus. Amen. Good morning, Adar. How are you? So as I mentioned, we're going to be doing Deuteronomy chapters 4, 5, and 6. We're going to read through them and we're going to comment on them. And if there's any type of revelation that jumps out to you guys, please just leave them in the comments because I am blessed by your comments. This is a group effort, and the things that God reveals to you throughout these studies, they can help a multitude of people. So let's get started with chapter 4. So this is a call to obedience for Israel. So now Israel, this is the Lord speaking. Now Israel, listen to the statutes and ordinances I am teaching you to follow, so that you may live, enter, and take possession of the land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Notice that you have to, he specifically says, the statutes and conditions, you have to take in accordance and listen to them and obey them in order to receive the blessing that is to come on them. So obedience is required. Verse 2, you must not add anything to what I command you or take away from it, so that you may keep the commands of the Lord your God I am giving you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor. For the Lord your God destroyed every one of you who followed Baal Peor. So Baal is a demonic, it's a demon god, it's a lowercase g god. And just to recap, whenever some of the people, they were enticed to go and worship this deity through fornication. So these people basically came to the children of Israel, enticed them with sex, and in doing that, they fell for the bait. They ended up being consecrated to the altar that they served by eating the foods that were served consecrated to demons, and they started to worship Baal, and God became angry with them, and they ultimately died. He said, but you have remained faithful to the Lord your God, who are all alive today, because all the ones that were unfaithful, he took them out. So look, I've taught you statutes and ordinances as the Lord my God has commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to possess. Carefully follow them, for this will show your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the people. Whenever we're obedient to God, it shows as a proof of wisdom and understanding for the precepts and what we believe in Christ. A lot of times people find it hard to believe that Christians are truly Christians, because if you look at the way we live our lives, it is not in accordance to the way that God has called us to live, and we're known as hypocrites. And so this right here is saying, for this will show your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the peoples. When they hear about these statutes, they will understand this great nation is indeed a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call him? And what great nation has righteous statutes and ordinances like this entire law I set before you today? There's none. Only be on your guard and diligently watch yourselves, so that you don't forget the things that your eyes have seen, and so that you don't slip from your mind as long as you live. Again, right here, what it's saying is remember the victories that your Lord your God has brought you through. And we can apply this to our lives today. Whenever we're going through difficult things, if we can remember at least one victory, at least one thing that we knew only God could have delivered us through, it makes the future battle significantly easier and lighter whenever we know that we have a victory coming, whenever we know that we serve a God that is undefeated and is true to his word. He says, teach them to your children and your grandchildren. The day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, the Lord said to me, assemble the people before me, and I will let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me, and all the days they live on the earth, and may instruct their children. And again, the fear that he's saying is not necessarily like fear me or die. It's kind of like the fear that a child would have for upsetting their parent. Like, if you bring home a bad report card to your parent, or if you've done something wrong, you fear the consequences from your parent, but you know that your parent loves you. You know that your mother or your father loves you. But there's a fear affiliated with that love, and the fear is the disappointment that you may bring upon that parent. Okay, verse 11. So he says, you came near and stood at the base of the mountain, a mountain blazing with fire, into the heavens and enveloped a total black cloud. Then the Lord spoke to you from the fire. You kept hearing the sounds of the words, but didn't see a form. There was only a voice. He declared his covenants to you. He commanded you to follow the 10 commandments, which he wrote on 2 stone tablets. At the time, the Lord commanded me to teach you the statutes and ordinances for you to follow in the land that you are about to cross into and possess. And remember, the 10 commandments took place both twice in Exodus. The first said Moses broke, and the second said, and both of them they're slightly different. They're not identical. And then we're going to go through the 10 commandments again in the book of Deuteronomy. So this is going to be the third time of trying to get the Israelites to understand the statutes of the Lord via the 10 commandments. But I believe in Deuteronomy it's essentially been perfected. So diligently watch yourselves, because you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you out of the fire at Horeb. So there was whenever he spoke to them, he wants you to understand that he's a spirit and he's with you. And though you may not see the signs and symptoms of his presence, he is with you and he will not leave you. So he's saying, so you don't act corruptly and make an idol for yourselves in the shape of any figure, a male or female, or any form of any animal on the earth, any winged creature that flies in the sky, any creature that crawls on the ground, or any fish in the waters under the earth. When you look to the heavens and see the sun, moon, and stars, all the stars in the sky, do not be led astray to bow and worship to them and serve them. God created them. He did not want you to create the creation, but he did not want you to worship the creation, but he wants you to worship the Creator. So the Lord your God has provided them for all people everywhere under the heaven. But the Lord selected you and brought you out of Egypt's iron furnace, to be a people for his inheritance as you are today. So the Lord was angry with me on your account. Again, this is Moses here. And he swore that I would not cross the Jordan and enter the good land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. I won't be crossing the Jordan because I am going to die in this land. And could you imagine that Moses started this journey at the age of 80 years old, and here he is now approximately 40 years later, 120, 121 years, and because he was disobedient to the Lord, he is now not going to be able to walk into the land that he has been leading these people to for 40 years. And this goes to say that to whom much is given, much is required. Moses saw Moses saw God face to face. He saw him face to face, and he knew who God was, and he was disobedient. God told him to speak to the rock so that the people of Israel could see his holiness, and they could see his righteousness and his power at work through the words that came out, and they would be encouraged by that. But Moses was angry, and he struck the rock. And because of that, it wasn't just Moses' disobedience, but it was the robbery of the people that did not get to see the work of the Lord through the commands of the words that came out of their mouth. The word says that the power of life and death is in the tongue, and Moses would have been able to really drive that home by being obedient and speaking to the rock, saying, "Thus saith the Lord, open up and pour out your water." But instead, Moses struck the rock, and indirectly he received glory for it. And God was angry with him and said, you will not enter the land, because not only did he rob the people from receiving the blessing of knowing that God is with them through the words that they speak, but he was essentially disobedient as well. Okay, so but right here, but you are about to cross over, take a land of this good, take possession of this good land. Be careful not to forget the covenants of the Lord your God that he made with you, and make an idol for yourselves in the shape of anything he has been forbidden for you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, and he is a jealous God. He loves these people so much that he has delivered them, and he has done all these things for them. And the moment they go and give accreditation to someone else or something else, he becomes upset, and I think rightfully so. We are made in his image, and if we had loved a child so much so we did all these things for them, only for them to go and worship and give accreditation and their allegiance and alliance to someone else, though we raised them and we were there to help them, and when they were in the hospital we were there, we did all these things for them, we too would feel jealous. And so God is a jealous God. He is a father. He's a father first. And he says, when you have children and grandchildren and have been in the land a long time, and if you act corruptly, make an idol in the form of anything, and do what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God, angering him, I call heaven. And this is a declaration from Moses. He says, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you today, that you will quickly perish from the land you are about to cross the Jordan to possess, and you will not live long there. You will not live long there, but you will certainly be destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the people, and you will be reduced to a few survivors among the nations where the Lord your God will drive you. There you will worship man-made gods of wood and stone, which you cannot see, hear, eat, or smell. They cannot see, hear, eat, or smell. They're inanimate objects. But from there you will search for the Lord your God, and you will find him. And when you seek him with all your heart and all your soul, when you are in distress and all these things have happened to you, in the future you will return to the Lord your God and obey him. So a consequence of it, of them being disobedient, is the removal of the pleasure and the presence and the rest that he gives them. And I think that applies for a lot of us. A lot of us. He says, when you search for him with all your heart and your soul, you'll find him at that moment. But whenever clearly you're looking for things of the world, you indeed will not find him. He won't be there, because he's not of the world. He is a spiritual being, and he is holy and righteous. So he says he will not leave you, destroy you, or forget the covenant with your ancestors that he swore to them by oath, because the Lord your God is a compassionate God. And remember, the only reason he's dealing with these people the way he's dealing with them is not because he cares to uplift their wickedness, but he swore an oath to Abraham, their descendants, their ancestors, and he is making sure that he fulfills that oath, even though these are a stiff-necked people. Verse 32, indeed, ask about the earlier days that preceded you, from the day God created mankind on the earth, and from one end of the heavens to the other. Has anything like this great event ever happened? Or has anything like it ever been heard of? Has a people heard God's voice speaking from fire as you have and lived? Or has God attempted to go and take a nation as his own out of another nation by trials, signs, wonders, and war, by a strong hand and outstretched arm, by great terrors, as the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? He has done mighty things for them. You were shown these things so that you would know that the Lord is God, that the Lord is God, and there is no other besides him. He let you hear his voice from heaven to instruct you. He showed you his great fire on earth, and you heard his words from the fire. Because he loved your ancestors, and he chose their descendants after them, and brought you out of Egypt by presence and great power, to drive out before you nations greater and stronger than you, and to bring you in and give you their land as inheritance, as is now taking place. Remember, the only reason the Israelites were by any means successful at all is because God went before them. God went before them, defeated them in the spiritual realm, and then handed them over to them wholeheartedly. And so that way, all they had to do is destroy them physically. And he would put the spirit of fear on them, tremble. They would have anxiety, and they would a lot of times submit to them before the battle even began, because the presence of the Lord was there. They were only victorious because the presence of the Lord. And we see here, it says here, today recognize and keep in mind that the Lord is God in heaven and on earth in heaven above and on earth below. There's no other God. Keep his statutes and commands, which I'm giving you today, so that you and your children after you may prosper. So in order to prosper, you have to keep his commands and his statutes, and so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you for all time. Okay, verse 41. Then Moses set apart 3 cities across from the Jordan to the east, so one could flee there who committed manslaughter, killing his neighbor accidentally without previously hating him. He could flee to one of these cities and stay alive. Bezer in the wilderness on the plateau land, belonging to the Reubenites, and Ramoth and the Gilead, belonging to the Gadites, and Golan and Bashan, belonging to the Manassites. And the introduction to the law. This is the law Moses gave the Israelites. These are the decrees, statutes, and ordinances Moses has proclaimed to them after they came out of Egypt, across the Jordan in the valley facing Beth Peor in the land of King Sihon of the Amorites. He lived in Heshbon, and Moses and the Israelites defeated him after they came out of Egypt. They took possession of his land and the land of Og, king of Bashan. The 2 Amorite kings who were across the Jordan to the east from Oror on the rim of the Arnon Valley as the Mount Sinai, that's Mount Hermon, and all the Arabah on the east side of the Jordan as far as the Dead Sea below the slopes of Pisgah. Now we're going to go through the 10 Commandments again in chapter 5. We went through them twice in Exodus, but now we're going to go through them a final time, I believe, in chapter 5. So it says, Moses summoned all the Israelites. Let's see, first let me check and see. Hi, Jenna. You guys are some early risers. I'm glad you guys can make it. So Moses summoned all of Israel and said to them, Israel, listen to the statutes and ordinances I am proclaiming as you hear them today. Learn and follow them carefully. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. He did not make this covenant with our ancestors, but with all of us who are alive here today. So the covenant he's making with the 10 Commandments were not with Abraham. They were not with Jacob. They were not with any of the previous people. They are with the people who are present today. The Lord spoke to you face to face from the fire of the mountain. At that time, I was standing between the Lord and you to report the word of the Lord to you, because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up to the mountain. And he said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have any other gods besides me. That's number 1. Do not have any other gods besides me. That includes money. That includes your husband. That includes your wife. That includes your job. That includes validation from other people. That includes anything that you serve as an idol is also known as a deity and a God. He does not want you to put anything else besides him. He is the only God in your life. Do not make an idol for yourself in the shape of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters underneath the earth. Do not bow. And when he says waters underneath the earth, I'm not going to get into this now, but he's essentially talking about the marine kingdom. Okay, do not bow and worship to them, and do not serve them, because I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. He says it a few more times. He's a jealous God, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquity on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me. This is a generational curse of obedience. When you're disobedience, whenever you're disobedient to the Lord, it will not only afflict you, it will afflict your children. So the decisions that you make today will be either a blessing or a curse to your children. Your relationship with God and your obedience to his commands will either be a blessing or a curse to your children. He said, but I'm showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. So even with him giving, blessing 1,000 generations of those that love him, like you guys love God right now. And so indeed your children will be blessed if you continue to love God. But he was even merciful to the ones that hated him, only cursing them to the 3rd and 4th generation, when indeed he's blessing those up to 1,000 generations for those who love him. He says, do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. No, like OMG, like none of that. No, like GD, like God, and then, damnation. We don't do that here. We're not going to use his name in vain in any capacity. Okay. Be careful to remember the Sabbath day. We saw in the book of Numbers and throughout Exodus, he is like an avid fan of the Sabbath day. He wants us to keep it. He wants us to have a day of rest that we consecrate to him and spend that day with him. He says that he said, keep it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you. The true Sabbath is on Saturday. But the Catholic Church, they changed it to, the Roman Catholic Church changed it to Sunday because they found that Sunday was the day that Christ was actually crucified, or that he rose from the dead. He died on a Good Friday. So Friday he died, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he rose on the third day. And so then they tried to make the third day the new Sabbath, but biblically, it's always been Saturday. He said, you're going to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. Do not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or donkey, any of your livestock, or the resident alien who lives within your city gates, so that your male and female slaves may rest as you do. He says, remember, you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a strong hand and an outreach arm. And when he says that you were the slaves in the land of Egypt, we can think about that today. Anything that he's brought us out of. Sometimes some people were in addiction, deep addiction, and they were a slave in the land of addiction, drug addiction, and he brought them out of there. And so he would want you to have mercy and have understanding on anybody who's been in the position that you've been in. Be gracious to them because the Lord your God was gracious to you. He said, that is why the Lord your God has commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and so that you may prosper in the land the Lord your God is giving you. This is the only commandment with a guaranteed blessing. And by honoring your mother and your father, that means not going behind their back talking about them, not gossiping about what they did or how they fall short or how they're not perfect. A lot of times, this is your parents' first time being a parent too, especially if you have 2-3 kids. They've never been the parent of 2 or 3 kids before. They're experiencing this for the first time. And so give them grace and mercy because nobody's perfect. And he says, by honoring them, you may prosper in the land the Lord your God has given you and live long. The others, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give dishonest testimonies against your neighbor, lying. Do not covet your neighbor's wife or desire your neighbor's household, jealousy and envy, his field, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, anything that belongs to your neighbor. It says here, the people response. The Lord spoke these commands in a loud voice to your entire assembly from the fire cloud and total darkness on the mountain. He added nothing more. He wrote them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. All you approached me with your tribal leaders and elders when you heard the voice from the darkness and while the mountain was blazing with fire. You said, look, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and greatness, and we have heard his voice from the fire. Today we have seen God speaks with a person, yet he still lives. We're in verse 25. But now, why should we die? That this great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer. For who out of all humanity has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the fire, as we have and lived? Go near and listen to everything the Lord our God says. Then you can tell us everything the Lord our God tells you. We will listen and obey. So the Lord heard your words when you spoke to me, and he said, I have heard the words that the people have spoken to you. Everything they have said is right. If only they have such a heart to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that they and their children would prosper forever. Again, if you want to prosper, you have to keep God's commandments and have fear. And the fear again is not like a fear me or die or a corrupt type of fear. It is the fear that a child has when it disappoints its parents. It's that type of fear. There's a dread that comes over you because you don't fear of being destroyed or anything like that. In this instance, God would destroy them, but you fear of disappointing them. So he says, go and tell them, return to your tents, but you shall stand with me, and I will tell you every command, the statutes and ordinances you are to teach them, so that they may follow them in the land I'm giving them to possess. Be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You are not to turn left or turn aside to the right or the left. Follow the whole instructions of the Lord your God has commanded you. So again, that you may live, prosper, and have a long life in the land you will possess. Keep his commandments, and you will do well in life. And we're in the last chapter we're going to cover today, which is chapter 6. So this is the command, the statutes and ordinances the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, so that you may follow them in the land you are about to enter and possess. Do this so that you may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life, by keeping all his statutes and commands I'm giving you, your son and your grandson, and so that you may have a long life. Listen, Israel, and be careful to follow them, so that you may prosper and multiply greatly, because the Lord your God, the God of your ancestors, has promised you a land flowing with milk and honey. Listen, Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them with you in your house, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and city gates. He says here, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Those words specifically are potent, and he wants us to embed them in our hearts. So we're in verse 10. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give you, a land with large and beautiful cities that you did not build, houses of every good things that you did not fill them with, cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olives groves that you did not plant. And when you eat and are satisfied, be careful not to forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Fear the Lord your God, worship him, take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you, for the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God. Otherwise the Lord your God will become angry with you, obliterate you from the face of the earth. Do not test the Lord your God as you tested him at Massah. Carefully observe the commands of the Lord your God, the decrees and statutes he has commanded you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so that you may prosper, and so that you may enter and possess the good land the Lord your God swore to give your ancestors by driving out all of your enemies before you, as the Lord has. When your sons ask you in the future, what is the meaning of the decrees, statutes, and ordinance that the Lord our God has commanded you? And you tell them, we were slaves of Pharaoh in the land of Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand. Before our eyes, the Lord inflicted great and devastating signs and wonders in Egypt on Pharaoh and all his household. But he brought us out from there in order to lead us and give us the land that he swore to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us to follow all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our prosperity always and our preservation, as it is today. Righteousness will be ours if we are careful to follow every one of these commands before the Lord our God as he commanded us. And that is all we're going to cover today. Yes, Jenna. Exactly, success. Exactly. The new covenant is through Jesus Christ. And a healthy fear of the Lord is by, if we don't want to disappoint him, we don't want to disappoint the Father that loves us so much, that went before us, that did everything for us, that fought our enemies for us, that was with us, that lifted us up when we had nobody else. We don't want to disappoint him, and we're not doing that out of fear. It was just like the fear of disappointment, because we know that it grieves us. Imagine like when you were in school and you got a bad grade, and your parents were really trying, and they paid for tutoring and all these things, and you're like, my mom, like, she's gonna be so upset with me. I did so bad in school today, and I don't want to. I'm just so ashamed. Shame falls on you. And so that is the fear that the Lord is talking about. It's not like worship me or die. That's more of like Satan's tactic. We worship a loving Father, the eternal Father. And so that's all we're going to cover today. Hold on a second. Hey Google, volume 10%. Like, it gets really loud at times. But anyway, yeah, we worship a loving, merciful Father. And I really pray that this resonated with some of you guys today. I know that some of us have issues with fathers, like with just having biological earthly fathers due to abandonment issues or in any type of trauma. But God, he's a different type of father. He's a spiritual father, and he was there the whole time. He was waiting for you and tugging at you to get your attention. And so that's all we're going to cover today, guys. I know it's early, and I'm not going to keep you too long, because I know a lot of us have to go to work and things like that. And so I pray for you. I pray that God continues to bless you. I pray that you have a wonderful day. I pray that the blessings of Deuteronomy 28, we've not gotten there yet, but it's one of my favorite blessings. Deuteronomy 28, 1 through 14. We don't want anything to do with the verses after 14. Those are for our enemies. This right here, 1 through 14, are for us. We will be blessed when we come in, blessed in the city and in the country. He will command blessings on the works of our hands. We serve a loving Father. I pray these things over you. And until tomorrow, guys, I will see you at the same time tomorrow.